Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions, how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is Anne van Gessel, an author, blog writer, and certified life coach based in Seattle. Hi, Anne.
Hey, Jen. How are you?
Good. I recently reconnected with Anne thanks to social media. And like many of my introductions to my guest speaker, Anne and I go way back to our high school days at Taipei American School. One of my fondest memories of Anne was how nice she was to people and what an outstanding swimmer she was on our swim team, breaking a lot of our school records at the time. I think your records don't really hold anymore. Sorry to say. So I'm excited to have Anne on Curito Connects today to talk about her journey since we graduated from TAS and where life took her and how she became a life coach, a author to a book she recently published, Cruise Finds Its Way, and an advocate for those with neurodivergent condition. A term I just recently learned and had to Google before this recording. So, Anne, you can tell us more about this. So I will stop here and have Anne start us off by sharing with us when you discovered your neurodivergent condition and when was that aha moment and how did you come to accept it and make positive changes to your life to navigate the world we live in?
Thanks. And you might have to repeat pieces of the question. So I think I remember the first one, which was when I was first diagnosed. So I answered that one first.
Yeah.
So at the age of 18, so this was freshman year in college, I sought therapy just because I loved self-development. Well, at the time, it was more self-help, thinking that there was something wrong with me, or wanting to be better because I wasn't good enough. And so the therapist actually recommended, based on our conversation, of how much difference there was in my SAT scores from the verbal and math piece, that she recommended I get tested for neurodivergent. At the time, it was called learning disability, was how I known it to be or knew it to be. But now we know it as neurodivergent. So I met with two psychologists, and so it was about like a half day series of tests, like that they had me take, and an interactive test, and the result was that I have dyslexia, verbal processing. They call it a disorder. I like to call it a challenge. And they highlighted short-term memory weakness. I don't actually know if that's an actual challenge, or I mean, like in itself, like a name, or if it really plays out from my other like the dyslexia and the verbal processing challenge. So yeah, that was at the age of 18. And then I'll just keep talking. Wait.
Well, actually, well, I mean, of course, we want you to keep talking. But I did want to ask you, since you started mentioning this, was this something you internally felt was off for you, like growing up? So you said you were diagnosed at 18 because you were seeking self-help and understanding of yourself, or do you remember like at an earlier age that you did feel like you weren't processing things or you weren't learning things as quickly as other peers in school, like now that you think back right now, because now that you know, like in terms of in hindsight, when you look back, were there moments where you felt like, I don't feel normal. Like, how come I'm not like other kids? And obviously back then for parents, there wasn't as much information as we have now, thanks to Google, to be able to sort this kind of information out, in terms
Yeah.
of kids' learning disabilities or conditions. And you grew up in Taiwan, right? So at that
Mhm.
time too, we here, at least in Taiwan, didn't really have that kind of resources as well. I think it's getting better, but I'm pretty sure back in the day, uh, again, schools, parents probably couldn't really pick it up as a condition to say, oh, okay, you know what? I think speech therapy is probably more obvious, because,
Yeah.
kids stuttering or not being able to pronounce words early on. But I'm just curious for you, like, what was it where you felt off and therefore at 18 in college felt that the need to kind of find answers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So my first memory is it's probably in either eighth grade or ninth grade. I mean, the years are so close together. So I just remember that as the books got thicker, it got more challenging, and especially in vocabulary. So those are two pieces. One is just it was harder to read and comprehend. I would get really tired, or I just wasn't digesting what I was reading. So that was one piece. And then the other major piece that stood out was vocabulary, attempting to memorize, or I guess memorize or learn these vocabulary, especially when it was preparing for the SAT. So that was a span of, I want to say, from eighth grade to um, onwards, basically. Because yeah, sixth grade, I remember it was still okay. I was still able to go through the textbook. And the seventh grade was getting a little challenging, but then I think honestly, eighth grade and ninth grade was a huge turning point. And I started noticing I was getting like C's, and pretty sure I got a couple D's, but mostly there were quite a few C's in there, and then there were it was happening more in like the social science and science, where the textbooks were really thick. Um, and so at the age of 18, it was really twofold. One, um, I was I was curious. I'm always curious to be a better version of myself, and so that's why I sought therapy. And then the fact that the therapist recommended this test, it was exciting because I got to be involved in this activity where I would learn more about myself. So that really prompted that eagerness at that time. Uh,
But so when you were in school and your grades were not, up in the B's and the A's,
yeah,
was this something that the teachers helped you understand too? Like, because I feel like usually in schools, teachers, right? Like, especially if you were a kid who wanted to understand, well, why, like, how do I get better grades, right? Like, I'm really trying here. I don't know why this is the case, right? So usually maybe tutors come in or
yeah,
they try to help you figure that out.
mhm,
So I was curious about that, but also in terms of like your parents, were they kind of
mhm.
like, did they give you pressure academically to be like, Anne, come on, we need better grades here? And did that
Yeah,
affect how you, felt about yourself as well?
yeah. So I'm definitely in a different mental space now, because back then when I'm reliving that experience, it was very challenging, and I felt uh, not definitely not good enough, and I was trying really hard. I think there was a perception that I wasn't trying hard enough and that I was being lazy. I did have a tutor for physics. It really didn't help. I mean, it helped a little bit, but like it wasn't helping me to comprehend the material better, but I was doing a little bit better in my uh, like the what do you call it, grade wise. In terms of from the teacher's perspective, so sorry, I'm going to back up 1 second. So it put a lot of pressure. Well, well, sorry, let me back up even more. I felt pressure because I'm sure, like as I'm looking back, they didn't mean to put pressure. But like I said, back then I was not um, in a mentally good space. I felt a lot of pressure, and actually, I cheated in one of my vocab tests, and I wasn't a very good cheater because I got caught, and so I didn't cheat after that. More because I didn't want to get caught, but that was the type of pressure that I felt. I felt that was my only way at the time. And I think you were asking me about how my, I mean, I think from my parents' perspective, they really wanted me to do well because my future depended on it. Um, and from that time and space. But I mean, looking back, it doesn't seem so bad, but I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. It feels like a like like undiagnosed, like you don't know what you don't know, and so there's a lot of assumptions being made and a lot of judgment, and it's not fun when you're going through it.
But that's why we're having this talk, right? And it's because you went through it and you came out of the other end. And the fact that you I mean, you if you weren't curious, when you went to college to seek help and to seek understanding, you might still be navigating this world with that same mindset from school.
Yeah,
Like, right?
yeah,
Going like,
that's very,
it's like, I don't know what words you would have used, but maybe like, oh, why am I so stupid? Like, I can't do this or that. Like, this is really hard for me. I'm really, really trying. Like, I'm a failure, all these negative words that probably was simmering in your space at the time. And from like, and you said, like, there are people who don't get diagnosed or who navigate their life in these settings, right, trying to do the norm, right? You go
yeah,
through school, you try to get a job, and not really understanding your condition to be able to be your best self and excel in the areas that you're good at, right? So, which brings me to ask then, how, once you discovered and was properly diagnosed with a learning disability, neurodivergent, this terminology we are now learning, um, how did you, that clearly was a very big aha for you. You're like, oh, it's not right. It's like, it's not just me, like this, I have a condition, right? It's not like
yeah,
I clearly was trying very hard this whole time, but there is another explanation for why I didn't get to excel in these areas. Like,
yeah.
that must have changed changed your world for you completely.
It definitely did, and so this was when I was 18, and at that time I thought I got a professional confirmation. I can laugh now, but I at the time I was probably not laughing, but I thought I got a professional confirmation that I'm as dumb as I thought. And so at that time I hit a like I heard, well, I heard, but I didn't process what they said. I just heard, you're professionally stupid. like, um, and and I told my parents. They were probably the only ones I told, I think. Um, there's a lot of things that I don't remember, probably for good reason. And my parents meant well. They said, don't talk about it because it's not something that's welcomed. Um, and you don't want to, when you're applying for work, or especially for work, you don't want to talk about it or share that you have it, because you will probably be eliminated. And that's what I've heard. It's um, unfortunate, but it happens. Hopefully less now, because I think there's more awareness. But yeah, at the time, I hid it away, pretty much like a dirty secret. And then within the last, I want to say 5 years, I've really, maybe 6 years, just been able to be in the space to take a good look at it, and look at it from a point of, that is, no, it's not something wrong with you, there's something different. Because I realize I've been like, and this is part of my journey of becoming a coach, where I'm coaching other people to be their authentic selves, but then here I am not being authentic, and I'm not fully accepting all of me. So I really had to uh, take a good look,
Mm.
and whether I liked it or not, um, but I'm choosing to let it in.
I'm so proud of you. Uh, but so
Thank
I
you.
so when you mentioned I just wanted to pick your brains here a little bit. When you
Yeah,
mentioned career track, right? In terms of, so okay, so you were diagnosed, you understood you have this condition, you hid it in the closet, you continued school, you graduated from college, you went into
yeah,
the workforce. Um, how was navigating the workforce for you before you started to kind of also tend to your passion of like coaching, right? Could you kind of share that part
yeah.
as well?
Well, so so I want to make sure I understand. So, like, how do I navigate the workplace, and then
Coaching,
uh,
yeah. So I guess we
the
can
coach?
start with like, you can
Yeah,
talk a little bit about work, right? So you were saying, your parents encouraged you not to mention that you have this disorder, disability, condition. Okay, we're gonna use the
yeah,
word condition, right? So, don't mention it, and that do your best to find a career track that works for you, right? Like,
yeah,
because you got to work to feed yourself. So, how did you
yeah,
navigate that space after school? So, you figured out, like, okay, like you said, I'm not that stupid. I have this condition. So, all right, I'm going to finish college, right? And then pick courses
yeah.
that work for me. And, what did you end up with as a degree?
Oh, so what I ended up as a degree was East Asian Studies with a focus on China. So I learned like all these different aspects, from religion to the language to the arts of China, and then a minor in Chinese. And so after that, finding work was challenging. But honestly, it wasn't because of my learning difference or challenge. It was really due to the economy. But once I entered the workforce, and I started to uh, do more complex type jobs. Like at first, I was like admin assistant, and so it's sort of like going through the levels of work. And so as it got more challenging, like I can already see a pattern. Like as the books got thicker, as the work got more challenging, um, is actually I'm just having that realization now. Um, that it's just, I can see how like it just becomes, it sort of is like the short-term memory weakness. Like I can only hold so much space like in my head, and it takes a while for me to transfer from short-term memory to long-term memory, and when things are not intuitive. So I'm talking about like processes, and if there's like anything that, like there's like multiple things happening, like multitasking. is not exactly a strong point. Yeah, so work. So basically, what I found to be to to be successful, it worked basically. I know the same thing with school. Like it took over my personal life. I don't have much of a personal life, and actually, I have the pandemic to thank for my personal life. But we can talk about that later, if appropriate. But basically, I will spend most of my time, my personal time, to complete the work, whether it's schoolwork or work, and create that space for myself. Sorry, I'm talking about what made me successful. I forgot your initial question already.
Oh, no, no, that's fine. I mean,
Right.
it was about like how you navigated the career path,
Okay.
right? In terms of like after like after you were diagnosed and you understood you had this condition and you said you were
Yeah.
realizing there was this pattern where it's like basically you only have so much bandwidth to hold
Yeah.
information and processing things. And so how you excelled in school or how you navigated a school environment was similar to navigating a working environment, right? So as you got promoted, as the workload got heavier, you were not
Yeah.
able to process that. So it wasn't it yeah, it wasn't that you couldn't excel in the job you were in. It's just that how you process things wasn't
Yeah.
enabled you to do so, right?
The processes are more complex. Like it's no longer step one to step five. Now there's like 72 steps, and you're kind of asked to. It's not intuitive. You're asked to memorize these 72 steps because you're working with different orgs or different stakeholders, and so that's when it gets really challenging. And sometimes I feel like there's there's a lot of acronyms for different orgs, and so if I switch a different job to a different company, then they have different acronyms, and so there's that piece too. Like there's a lot of memorization. It's again, it's not intuitive. When it's intuitive, it's a lot easier. Coaching for me comes rather naturally because I'm just like it's like things you can take and apply to different situations. It's not a whole new thing.
So is that kind of how you found your niche, like in terms of like what are you good at? So it
Yeah,
obviously like a working environment wasn't super suitable for you in terms of I guess some of the jobs you held in right in
yeah,
terms of the cross department stuff and
yeah.
all too many multitasking situations versus finding something that's more linear maybe perhaps like did you manage to figure that out too like in that process of like well I'm really good at doing this so I should just I should find me a job that just allows me to do this you know
I will say I'm still in the exploration mode, and maybe it's part of my desire to learn and my sense of curiosity and adventure, because one of my roles, because I actually have a lot of interest, but one of my work, it is getting challenging for me, and so because of that, like everything that I've described to you so far, I'm still in it, but I think right now the difference is, so with this current company I'm working at, when I first got hired, I did share with them that I'm nearly divergent. And there's not much has been going on within the discussion, but it's really been my own growth of sharing, because previously I would not talk about it and I would just suffer silently. And I would usually, like, there's a set pattern that I would go through. I would just uh, be very I would I'm very persistent, and just I'll just go with it, and then I'll just drive myself to the ground and I'll get really sick. And in the past, I can laugh about it because it is kind of funny. In the past, I'll get like all these different kinds of, I don't want to say diseases, but like I'll go to the doctor and they'll say, oh, I haven't seen this in a while, or I only see it in people with like low immunity, because that's how stressed I was. And I would, like I said, silently suffer because I didn't share just how challenging it was, and I would do it on my own time, and it's not healthy. Like, now I'm not laughing because it is really not healthy. But it's funny because like I wasn't aware previously, but now that I'm aware of just um, that set pattern.
Yeah,
Actually,
see,
it's kind of sad.
you have to break your set pattern there. You have to, in which you're
Yeah,
what you're doing, being on this podcast and you're sharing all that. That's also a step.
yeah, yeah, and I guess if I'm taking a moment and like just tapping in, it is sad too. That I felt like I had to,
Like
um,
suppress it.
yeah, like just suppress my own needs of thriving or being healthy, um, just to show up like well, I don't want to say like everybody else, like how I perceived everybody else.
And
Yeah.
whenever you bring that term up, do people look at you and go, "What is that?" Like kind of like what I did when when you told me, I was like, "Hold on, let me Google this. I'm not sure I know what this is."
Wait,
So
are you
you're
talking about
bringing more awareness.
are you talking about the term neurodivergent, or are you talking about dyslexia?
Neurodivergent. I think dyslexia, I think now, like you said earlier too, like nowadays there's more awareness when someone says,
Yeah,
"Oh, I have ADD, ADHD,
yeah,
I have a learning disability," and then maybe the further conversation is, "Oh, what kind of learning disability do you have?"
yeah,
But neurodivergent was, I mean, I've never heard of it until you told me. So I'm
yeah.
just curious that when you do use that term, do people look at you with eyeballs going like,
Oh,
"What is that?"
yeah.
Or is it
Well,
quite common now?
well, so I just learned this term within the last month, so I actually haven't used to that much.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so I'll have to get back to you on that. I've been using neurally diverse, and I just learned a month ago that neurodivergent is someone that's like myself. And then when you have people like myself in a group with people that are uh, typical, yeah, typical, neurotypical, then as a collective, you have a neurally diverse group. So I just learned that a month ago, and I was like, oh, okay. But I don't think it's a standard, to be honest. I mean, I think like, um, well, so sorry, I'm thinking in my head. It's not a standard because I think what's happening is the conversation is pivoting. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it's typically known as a disability, or that there's something wrong with you, condition, or I don't know if people call it disease, but and so I think the conversation is really shifting, like bringing that awareness that all the parts are there. It's the same parts. It's just the wiring and how the information is connected or transferring is different. And so I've had to learn that myself just within the last 5 or 6 years, because I was part of the collective that I thought I was disabled or dumb, and stamp of dumbness from a professional. And so part of my awareness and journey, I want to make sure that as much as I can, within my uh, realm of impact, that people like me don't feel that way. And actually, is even bigger than that, because someone who's tired, like I'm just imagining like someone who has two young kids or didn't get enough sleep and there's so much pressure at work, they might, be forgetful and function not at their top. So it's not just about them nearly divergent. Like I guess it's kind of like a collective, like being human, being like compassionate for people,
Mm.
because we're not always at our top A game every day.
It's true. It's true. Having that awareness, right? So I wanted to bring the conversation back to talking about how all this led you to coaching and how you also published a book recently talking about all this.
Yeah. So the coaching, so I think that's just part of my personality, um, the curiosity and always wanting to find a better way, and not from a place of like, well, actually there's probably a little place where like it's not good enough. Um, it, um, I mean, yeah, that was definitely the driver before, and then but what I'm really pointing to is just curiosity for learning in life, not about my personal journey. And so when I went to grad school, I took this class called Emotional Intelligence, or EQ for short, and there was a piece about coaching and how you have the wisdom within you and you know what's best for you. It was a mind blower because I grew up in Taiwan where it's just the culture, you don't know what's best for you. Your parents know what's best for you. Your grandmother, your grandparents know what's best for you. And so as long as they're still alive, you don't know what's best for you. And then when you have kids, you know what's best for your kids, and it continues on, and you get the point. And so when I learned that concept, I was like, I know what's best for me. Wait a minute, like I gotta take this class again. So I took it two more times, just to
Wow.
be sure, just to be sure that I heard correctly. No, but really, it was an amazing class, and I learned so much about myself. Because talk about wiring, I was laughing when I was scared, and wait, I gotta think about this. Yeah, laughing when I was scared, and I don't know. Basically, what I'm trying
Like
to say is,
reverse emotions basically kind of, right?
yeah,
From the norm.
yeah, like I just wasn't connected to myself. I didn't know how the hell I felt. People would ask me, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel. Can you tell me? Wait, maybe I call my mom or my grandma. They'll tell me. But I just was not connected to myself. Basically, like a mannequin or a shell of a person. And so it really taught me to get in touch very slowly. Had quite a few layers to unpeel. And so part of, so that was the first touch with coaching. And then I was like, this is amazing. And I'd like to be a coach, but I didn't, there was a lot of self doubt in regards to, could I, you know, do this as a profession? And, would other people believe in this concept too? Because I mean, I grew up in that society where, everybody, well, at least as far from my perception, that nobody really thought for themselves. And so I think it was 2018. Yeah, it was 2018 that I was invited to this like this observation for this coaching program. And I went, and it was so uncomfortable, but in a way that I enjoy. And it just reminded of me of my EQ class. And so I jumped in took my savings and all my savings and went through this class and learned a lot about myself. You had another question for me.
Oh, well, how
Oh,
it led to your book.
oh, okay, okay. Thank you. Um, well, my book, well, I will say it's kind of connected to coaching. So, coaching was really the road, so to speak. Like, well, now okay, or maybe I can say it as a lens, like everything. So, coaching was a pivoting point. It basically took me from not from thinking I'm not good enough to I'm good enough, but I want to be better. And so like self-help to self-development is how I would describe it. And so that was a huge pivoting point. By no means was I like enlightened. Like I was just like really starting my journey, so to speak. I will say like from then till now, I feel like I've been on a fast track of growth and things are happening a lot faster and a lot of good things. And a lot of challenging things too, but I think the challenging things have been put in place to fast track my growth. And I was previous to that, I was really in these cycles. Like I could, tell like I told you, I would, so much like a pressure cooker, that I would like internally bust and some kind of new, I don't want to say disease. Yeah, disease. Yeah. Disease would form, really looking to break that. Yeah, so the book really, so it came from a place where like I really been doing the internal work, and and the space has been created for the idea. So that's where it came from.
So so Cruise finds its way is Cruise you basically.
Yeah, yeah, I'm Cruz. Yeah. Uh, yeah, yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about where you hope this will all lead? Like, so now there's a book. You're doing book tours? Are you doing are you going to write more books? Like, I know you're very passionate about being an advocate for more people um, who have these conditions, right? To not feel like they have to bottle it up, like you said
Yeah,
earlier, but really learn how to embrace it,
yeah,
own up to it, and find their
yeah,
voice within it to navigate the world we live in. So, I guess if we could, I mean, just to wrap up this, conversation, and thank you so much for sharing your story. What kind of advice, I guess maybe I don't when we didn't really go into talking about like when you coach people, what kind of
yeah,
clients you have, like if they're also individuals who are um, with conditions, or are they just any type of individual who is seeking a life coach. But what would you normally, or I guess, what would you tell your younger self what you know now, or give a 2 cent or words of wisdom
yeah.
to those who are listening to this episode and really relate to your storyline?
I'll go back and answer your previous question first. So
Okay.
what am I looking to do next? I'd love to do school tours and really be able to impact children. I think if there's going to be challenges, it could start as young as the I mean, it depends on each person and how, because dyslexia can show up in many forms, and one dyslexic is different from another, and it could be really challenging from a younger age or older. But anyway, I'd like to do school tours and really like to continue speaking about it. Love to be on more podcasts, so I really appreciate you inviting me here. And in terms of next book, I am working on a teaching memoir of my journey with dyslexia, and so that's a book more for adults. I did my first draft, so hoping to be able to go through that and publish it by next year.
Oh,
It's a lot thicker.
congratulations.
Thank you. It's a lot thicker of a book, so it's actually like more challenging for me too to go through it. You were gonna ask me. Oh, you're saying, oh, if I had a tip for my younger self, I would say I think it's so important to be grounded um, in in knowing, like truly knowing ourselves and our strengths, and that having that self confidence. I didn't have that. Um, I did, and it went away. I think starting sixth grade, I lost my confidence. And actually, it I remember I was giving a speech in sixth grade, and I froze. I couldn't remember my words, and everyone was staring at me, and I felt so awkward that I cried. So I feel like that was a moment when I lost my groove or, or self confidence. And so I think it's really important to, like, I would have loved to have known at that time, like, you're going to go through embarrassing moments, and that doesn't have to signify anything about you. Like, it's just a boo-boo, a mistake, and let's get over it. And it doesn't reflect who you are. And I've seen kids that have that self-confidence, and I would love for that, for everyone to have that. And for someone that they if they have someone they trust that they can go to for support.
Those are very helpful tips. I think any parent listening who have kids, that's something to remember. You know, when you're raising your children at home. I also usually end my conversation with my guests by asking them, what keeps them grounded. So you mentioned being grounded earlier. So what
Yeah.
keeps you grounded? And it could be anything that you actually do. It could be um, you know, I think for some, and I sometimes also ask, like, what books would you recommend people to read that really resonated with you or has helped you? And actually, in addition, for our particular conversation today, I'd like to also ask, like, if there's any resources that you think are really helpful for people who have these conditions, whether it's dyslexia or ADHD or ADD, and for individuals who have it, or parents who are working with their children who have it, as resources that they could look up and use. um yeah, and then of course, as I always say, I always put the links in the episode resources, so people will be able to find you down the line, buy your book on Amazon. Look forward to your book coming out next year as well.
Thank you. So I already forgot your first
First
question.
one
Oh,
was like, what keeps you grounded? Yeah, what keeps
right.
you grounded?
So what keeps me grounded is, so um, self care is so important. I honestly like all aspects of self care, and I feel like I spend like a good 50% of my week just with self care. It feels like that much, but like eating right, sleep hygiene, choosing what I surround myself with, like, what radio station am I listening to, or what music I'm listening to, the people I'm surrounding myself with, like all these aspects. And then reflecting. And reflecting and slowing down is something that I've recently learned that is really important, because I'm just like a steamroller, impatient optimist. But I realized that, even a cell phone needs to be charged at night, or even, car needs to be, gassed up, or Tesla needs to be, juiced up. That I can't just not take a break or slow down. So that's been a newer practice that it's okay to slow down. I don't have to feel guilty. I'm not wasting time.
It's hard
Uh,
to remember that, isn't it?
yeah, it really is. Like I get anxious when I'm like, oh my God, this minute, I could be eating and sending an email, or, I mean, like I can be eating and listening to a podcast. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna eat and enjoy this food, and that's the newest grounding practice that I've incorporated in my
Staying
life.
present.
Staying present. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good way to summarize it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of resources, um, actually, I recently met somebody, and he's actually someone that taught me the term neurodivergent. And so he's a coach, and he helps families reduce exhaustion and thrive without guilt. Basically, he's a life coach around neurodivergence.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think he would be a great resource. And he puts out these podcasts, like short, maybe not podcasts, like short video posts, anywhere from like, is your child, like questions to ponder about, basically.
Hmm.
Um, like, is your child trying hard enough? Not that he's questioning if your child's trying hard enough, but like, like these are the questions that parents would ask, or adults. He has a lot of compassion.
So what's his name?
His name is Christian, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but let me spell it out. Christian, Christian. Last name is Vinceneux.
Okay. Well, I'll put that link as well on the bottom
Okay.
of the episode resource so people
Okay.
can look
Yeah,
into him as well.
I can. I'll send you his LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So we have to wrap up. We don't have much time left. But did you have anything else you wanted to add to what we were talking about earlier?
Just one last message. It's fun to be different.
Oh, it's true. We should all embrace that, right? We all have our quirkiness, all of us. So, I am so happy to have had you. Thank you so much for making time to chat with us, and really to say, like, share your entire journey as well. It's all new to me too, because we haven't connected in, I don't know, over 15 years or so. But this is really great work that you're doing, so I'm really, really excited to share with more people about what you're doing, and your book, and bringing more awareness, right? Because I think by educating and bringing more awareness, we can all be more compassionate to one another, and people in these conditions don't have to be, feel like they're hiding, or,
Yeah.
like you said earlier, bottling it up or pushing it into the closet, closing it up, but really embracing it. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Anne.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. I really appreciate you.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.